Hey everyone, this is George, and I watched The Suicide Squad and I wanted to talk it over with fellow fans, but be warned, spoilers follow. But first, here's a little bit of a recap. So, this movie's directed by James Gunn. He's the helmer of such fan favorites as Slither and Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy films. And this movie has a massive cast, and the stars in this movie include Margot Robbie, who plays Harley Quinn, Idris Elba, who plays Bloodsport, Michael Rooker, who plays Savant, John Cena's Peacemaker, Viola Davis's Amanda Waller, and there's just so many, many more. I'm actually not sure if this movie's a direct sequel to the 2016 Suicide Squad film, but it does feel like it is connected, but not like a direct sequel. The whole story behind the Suicide Squad is that they're a ragtag group of high security prisoners, and they're kind of turned into soldiers for Amanda Waller's Task Force X. And they go on missions for her where death is pretty much a certainty in exchange for like time off of their prison sentences. In this film, Waller actually sends a massive team which includes the likes of Harley Quinn, King Shark, Bloodsport, Polka Dot Man, Captain Boomerang, Peacemaker, and just a whole lot of other characters. And they're being sent to this country in search of some sort of secret weapons development facility. And once they get there, of course, all hell breaks loose as the squad literally lives up to its name and half the team is immediately wiped out, including Captain Boomerang, who is actually one of my favorite characters from the original film and one of the few returning characters for this film. We see that a few of them are captured and that the rest actually continue on their mission. Weirdness and bloody mayhem ensues throughout the whole film, and the climax of the film actually sees the last few surviving members of Task Force X taking on Starro the Conqueror. Yes, Starro the Conqueror is in this movie in all of his starfishy glory. Hopefully Suicide Squad 3 will find a way to work in Jarro because I love that little guy too. The movie's a tornado of weirdness, goriness, and humor from start to finish, and Gunn brings his unique, distinctive brand of weird humor to the film, and I feel it's an incredible experience all on its own. To me, this movie is everything I wanted to see in a Suicide Squad film. But I do have to say, I haven't read a lot of Suicide Squad comics, and I did actually enjoy the first film, particularly Will Smith's Deadshot. But I felt that the first film, although a fun experience on its own, just didn't have the flair and over-the-top weirdness that lights up the screen and holds on to your attention for the full 2 hour plus runtime of this film. This movie was an experience, and I truly felt like I was on a thrill ride from start to finish. I think the story worked on so many levels, but it also faltered in some. For me, Gunn's directorial skills took this movie from what could have just been a schlocky, serviceable action film into something that could arguably be considered a work of art. Gory, outrageous, quirky art, but art nonetheless. I actually feel like this movie could not have been without Gunn behind the camera. And I felt like Gunn was at the top of his game with the humor in the movie, and it was fun seeing Gunn getting to play in an R-rated sandbox. And I just couldn't help but laugh at a lot of the R-rated gags, like what happened to the poor Weasel character, and they all jump out into the ocean, and then you just see Weasel jump in and immediately starts drowning, and then you hear Flag ask if anyone's checked to see if Weasel could swim, only to see him sink below the surface of the water, and you just hear him go, Weasel's down, over. I think the thing Gunn nails is the fact that you get the best moments in the film by just letting these diverse group of never-do-wells, just letting them interact with each other. And Elba's Bloodsport and Cena's Peacemaker were actually pretty amazing together. And it was a lot of fun seeing them treat each other as rivals, friends, and then eventually enemies. I was actually a little disappointed to see Cena's turn to the dark side because I really liked him as a member of their team. With that being said, it actually worked perfectly well because throughout the film, Gunn was kind of building up this character as someone who's unhinged and someone who might actually end up turning on the team. As for Harley, I've always liked Harley Quinn, but I've never been one of those diehard fans who absolutely loved the character. I thought she was one of the best things about the first film, but at times I felt that if Deadshot wasn't there, it could have easily been titled Harley and the Suicide Squad. But in this film, I liked how she felt balanced with her team. I think Margot Robbie's Harley would steal the show in pretty much anything you'd put her in, but here she felt like an important member of the team. I also liked seeing how capable she is. I have to remind myself that she wasn't just Joker's lady love because of her beauty, but because she's as deranged and deadly as he is, maybe even more so in some ways. I thought she was perfect in this film, and I hope to see her again with hopefully Gunn behind the camera. I literally enjoyed so many of the characters in this film, including Rick Flag, King Shark, Starro, Weasel, TKG, and pretty much everyone else, and especially Milton. R.I.P. Milton. Gone but not forgotten. I think we'd honestly be here all day if we talked about every member and their contributions to the film. But I did want to mention TDK. I honestly had no idea who this character was at all before watching this film. And then when I saw his arms pop off and then watching his arms fly over and start swatting at the soldiers, I was rolling with laughter. I could not get over how ridiculous this was. And to me, the funniest thing was that the guy didn't even really seem like he was able to fight that well with his detached arms. And you could see the soldiers swatting away his arms until they just shot and killed him. This is the kind of hilarious weirdness that I loved about this movie, and Javelin also had a brief hilarious moment with Harley before dying. But I did want to talk about what I actually loved most about this film, and that was that Gunn made me care about characters who I'd never even given a second thought to in the comics, particularly Ratcatcher 2 and Polka Dot Man. To me, you can see why characters like Peacemaker and Bloodsport are great fits for this film. But then you get to characters like Ratcatcher and Polka Dot Man, and I couldn't understand why these characters were on the team. And in their introduction, I might have actually missed what they'd done, and, maybe it was something incredibly bad, but within the scope of this film, I couldn't understand why they were being included on this team, because they seemed to be genuinely good-natured people, especially Ratcatcher, who actually showed kindness to everyone. Even King Shark, who tried to eat her. She showed a lot of compassion and empathy for everyone, and I couldn't believe someone like that could be put on the team. When I really think about it, it's just one of the ways Waller is ridding the world of metahumans under the guise of sending any metahuman on these suicide missions, but that's a different discussion entirely. But I was just blown away by the kindness she showed everyone, and I think she affected her team in a positive way by causing both Flag and Bloodsport to take up a cause to help others, when I think if she hadn't been there, the characters might have reacted very differently. With my limited comics knowledge of the Suicide Squad and the films and media I've seen them in, kindness and empathy isn't really a characteristic of someone recruited to the team. But you get it here with Ratcatcher, and I love that for such a minor character in the comics, she was able to become a huge part of this story and have such a huge impact on it. And back to Polka Dot Man, I also loved his journey in the film. When we start the movie, we see him deeply depressed and even hoping for death. But throughout the film, you see him slowly becoming a valued member of the team. He also starts to feel joy and confidence in himself. And I think when you see him smiling and dancing in the club with his team, you could tell that that was probably the first time in a very long time that he'd smiled and actually seemed happy. And like Ratcatcher, he also showed a lot of empathy and compassion for others, and you could see genuine pain from the loss of Milton, and then you felt his justified anger at his team for not even knowing who Milton was, even though the poor guy had been helping them for a good chunk of the film. It was nice to see people actually mourn the loss of others, and I thought that was a subtle nod that Polka Dot Man actually was a good, kind person. And I think my favorite moment of his was seeing him actually proud of himself, proclaiming that he's a superhero. You can just see so much happiness in his expression right before Starro crushes him. And I actually wish Gunn had spared him, because to me it was huge to see someone who'd suffered so much in life to finally find joy and purpose. At the very least, I think in his final moments he seemed fulfilled. And I think that's why I love Polka Dot Man so much in this film, is because he got to go on this journey and you see a real transformation of his character. So I've said a lot of praise for this film, but I didn't feel like it was flawless by any means. While Gunn is definitely a huge reason this movie worked, I felt like some of the quirkiness seemed a little bit too odd, like how the scene changes were spelled out with the landscapes and visual effects. That kind of actually took me out of the movie slightly, but with how this movie is, it's not really that big of a deal because the whole movie's over the top. And this next bit is a little bit of a positive and a negative. I tend to love in movies when we get to spend more time with the characters, and that's mostly true here too. but the movie's runtime probably could have shaved a little time off by spending less time with characters like Savant in the very beginning. And although I think Alice Braga is fantastic in everything I've seen her in, I almost felt like the freedom fighter bit of the story could have been left out of the story, and the story would have functioned the same, with the exception of Milton, of course. Milton's ride or die. But that's it for this video. So what did you all think of the film? I'd love to know what you thought, especially if you're a big fan of the comics. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.